Wiruna Holiday Home not only gives disabled people a break, but it also gives their families a breather. The home, which provides around 400 disabled people a 2-week holiday each year, will shut down due to a lack of funds, leaving its patrons with no place to go.
I honestly don't know where there is another place like this in Australia.
While government funding has remained constant, public donations have dropped and expenses have risen sharply. This year, Wiruna will be about $170,000 short of the $500,000 it costs to operate. The home was set up with telethon and government funding in 1980. The doors will close on March 31st next year. Peter Ryan, NBN News.
It's one of the biggest evenings of Speedway, with over 120 entries already received to contest the 5 divisions of racing, including the 17th anniversary Demolition Derby. And a big field of 30 modified hot rods will line up, all keen for a crack at the ultimate modified warrior, American barefoot Bob McCready. McCready is credited with over 300 feature race victories in the United States, but has arrived down under in a cloud of controversy. The New South Wales body has made a special dispensation for McCready to race with aluminium wheels, previously banned here. His main opposition will come from Sydney drivers Tony Hopping and Barry Bundy, and a strong local contingent including John Brown, Rod Dederer and Graham Gillespie. A strong lineup of super sedans will support the rods and the Demolition Derby.
Gunninan already builds around 60% of Sydney's passenger trains, leading the way the state-of-the-art Tangara. Today, another boost, a $400 million contract to maintain the Sydney fleet, including bogie work on freight trains.
We've worked on this program for over 2 years, and the culmination of a lot of team effort by a lot of people has brought about this result, and it's a great credit to them.
Transport Minister Bruce Baird, carrying the Liberal government's privatisation flag, handed over state-run Clyde and Elcar maintenance plants to tender.
It's very clear that the costs available through the private sector are considerably lower than through operating through State Rail in terms of our own workshops.
The Clyde Maintenance Centre was deserted this afternoon, the 700 workers walking off the job in protest. Around 400 workers will be kept on by Gunninan. State Rail has offered the remaining 300 voluntary redundancy. While the Sydney workers were shocked by the move, the 10-year contract has given Gunninan in Newcastle a new lease of life. The contract won't mean extra jobs for Gunninan here at Broadmeadow. What it will mean is security for those already employed. It's expected the Gunninan contract will save State Rail around $15 million each year. Peter Ryan, NBN News.
Shortly before 7 last night, 48-year-old Gary Shipley walked into this video shop on Wallumbye Road, West Cessnock, owned by his estranged wife, Norma. He then shot the 49-year-old woman in the head with a large calibre rifle. While police were still arriving on the scene, Gary Shipley ran to a car park at the back of the shop and shot himself twice in the head. He died instantly. Mrs. Shipley was taken to Cessnock District Hospital but was dead on arrival. Tim Howard was working in a shop nearby at the time of the shooting.
Some people came running out of the video shop and said, Norma's been shot, she's dead.
Witnesses of the murder-suicide are now receiving counselling. Police say there's been domestic trouble between the Shipleys before.
There was one incident reported to police a little short of a month ago, and the police have taken all the relevant action in relation to that.
So was there any action before the court?
There is process before the court at the moment, or there was, yes.
Police say Gary Shipley had left no clue of his intentions to murder, nor were they aware he possessed a gun. Last night's incident has sent shockwaves through the local community and refuelled the argument over the ready availability of guns.
I don't know how you're going to stop it. The people that want them, they'll get them. You know, they'll have them. The only people that are going to hand in their guns are the good people.
Things like this happen far too readily. No gun, there's no killing. It's something that can be avoided easily. Yes.
Surrounded by the Hunter Valley's famous vineyards, the 6,400-metre Cypress Lakes Country Club course is impressive. The Steve Symes design layout has been shaped with more than 10,000 truckloads of soil, 20,000 metres of pipe, 120,000 square metres of grass and a staggering 5,400 tonnes of special Tomigo and Menangle sand laid in the bunkers, which to the average weekend golfer are daunting to say the least. The final piece of the puzzle, the picturesque back 9 holes, was unveiled to the media today, signalling the start of a big few days for the course and its staff.
On Sunday we have an invitational cup and on Monday also for ladies, and from Tuesday the 24th we're open to the public.
A clubhouse and hotel complex will begin construction next February, as will the Cypress Lakes Village in the centre of the back 9. For Peter Newstad, the long hard grind through the recession has all been very worthwhile.
A lot of other projects weren't fortunate enough to come through this recession. We feel we have done the most difficult part of the work, and from here on we're looking forward to build accommodations now. We have a lot of people asking for it. We know that there is demand for golf course suites and villas and condominiums, so I'm very confident.
It may seem like a lot of garbage, but the question is it garbage or rubbish? Garbage is food waste or material that rots, while rubbish is unwanted waste, refuse, debris or litter. Kempsey Council says when ratepayers confuse the two and garbage is delivered to rubbish tips, problems can follow.
It's possible that the leachate from those tips can get down and pollute rivers and streams, and in some of our areas in fact could even get into the water supply, which is of grave concern to Council.
As a result, Council has decided to close tips at Fredericton, Stewart's Point, Southwest Rocks, Hathead, Gladstone and Willawarren. The central garbage depot is currently at Council's showground site, but from next March, residents will have to travel to the Crescent Head Road landfill site. Council is also encouraging ratepayers to become involved in composting.
That will certainly reduce the amount of garbage that needs to go into any sort of a tip. Also, we're trialling a recycling service in East Kempsey at the present time with a view to bringing that on stream.
It was the rowdiest funeral procession ever to wind its way along Macquarie Street. Northern District miners mourning the death of 200 jobs in the New Vale and Awabba State collieries in Lake Macquarie and blaming the state government as the killer. The angry miners took their accusations to the gates of Parliament House.
We want jobs! We want jobs! Why are we here? We're here because the government doesn't give a damn about the job of coal miners. Because this government is sacking 200 men from New Vale and Awabba to make room for 1 million tonnes of coal brought in from another area. And that's not going to bloody happen. I can guarantee you that.
The miners are calling for a moratorium on the closure of New Vale and the winding down of Awabba, an ICAC inquiry into the now aborted attempt by the government to sell off the 8 state mines, and ministerial support in calling Coal and Allied to the negotiating table over another 180 jobs the company's axed.
Hooray, Fay! Hooray, Fay!
While the miners' calls for Premier Fay to appear fell on deaf ears, Opposition Leader Bob Carr did come out with some reassurances.
We'll be pressing for an inquiry into the way this tendering process proceeded. We'll be saying to the government that the Miners' Federation ought to be able to come in again
and make a bid for these mines.
Amid all the uproar, the miners held a minute's silence for collieries closed and jobs lost. If publicity campaigns don't succeed in saving jobs, the union says its next move could be industrial action. Scott Bevan, NBN News.
It's the latest chapter in the saga of the old store's inglorious decline from a thriving institution to so much empty floor space. The co-op ceased trading more than 10 years ago. Since then, its 17,000 square metres have been dotted by the Pink Elephant market stalls and a Franklin supermarket, still fitted out, ready to reopen. The 1989 earthquake and subsequent insurance payout wrangle finally closed the doors. Bidding was described as sluggish at the mortgagee auction held in Sydney this morning. Negotiations with 3 interested syndicates after the auction arrived at the reserve price, believed to be somewhere between $1 and $2 million. Contracts have not been signed, but property agent Bailey Knight Frank is confident of a sale. Meanwhile, the Lake Macquarie Fair shopping centre at Mount Hutton has been sold to a Sydney-based investment company for a reported $17.5 million. The Brentwood Corporation will operate the centre as is, with its annual $40 million turnover and almost 2 million shoppers through the doors each year. Andrew Lobb reporting, NBN News.
Hello. Lucas Kemp is just 10 years old, but to live he needs a new heart and new lungs. Every morning Lucas spends a few minutes on his exercise bike, but even that tires him. Brushing his teeth with a normal toothbrush is exhausting, and he requires oxygen 24 hours a day. Lucas has a congenital condition called pulmonary hypertension. His pulmonary artery is collapsing, and as a result his heart and lungs are stretched out of shape. His condition was diagnosed 4 years ago, and in that time his health has deteriorated. He still manages to go to school most days, but it's becoming harder. He has a special teacher in his class to help him, because at any time his breathing could become shallow and his heart could stop.
Oh, well done.
It's a routine which his family is becoming used to. They've had to resuscitate him twice this year. Every member of the family knows the procedure for CPR.
I've had to be able to feel that I could leave him with Aaron and Brett. I never leave them on, the little ones on their own. But with these things that are happening, there's no guarantee of when or how. So we all needed to know.
Donna is all too aware that time is running on, and Lucas desperately needs the heart-lung transplant operation. He's been on the waiting list for 14 months, along with one other child in New South Wales. The operation has never been performed on a child in this state before, but the transplant team at Sydney St Vincent's Hospital is confident it can help Lucas if only a donor can be found. But for Lucas to live, someone else must die. A child the same size, with the same blood type. Australia has the lowest organ donor rate in the developed world. The figure is even lower for children. In New South Wales, if you agree to become an organ donor, it says so on your licence. But it's your family who have the final say. And in most cases, it's an issue which is not openly discussed, but one which doctors believe should be.
It's probably just best if people just talk about death and dying and see that as a natural part of the life process. We all are born and we all sort of have to die one day.
There are currently 3,000 Australians waiting for organ transplants, and waiting is the worst. To help, Donna and Lucas attend a support group meeting in Newcastle every month. While Lucas is by far the youngest, all these adults know what he's going through. They too are waiting to receive a call or a message on their beeper to contact the hospital. Of those waiting, 20% will die before they have their operation. But doctors believe it's a figure which can be improved if only more people were aware of what the organ donor transplant program is all about.
What I can say is, for all the trauma and the grief and the tragedy of losing a child,
For a lot of grown-ups, their childhoods are locked up, packed away in the dark toy box of the soul. Dietmar Liederwascher's commitment to comics drove him to leave a high school teaching job and open an emporium of colourful characters and daring deeds. At Graphic Novels, nothing's quite normal. The till's from another time. The telephone's been Disneyfied.
I think I've been fortunate with the parents that I had were very supportive of all the things that I was interested in as a child, and I suppose because of that, looking back over these sorts of things, they bring back good memories. And I think that's why people do collect these things, simply for nostalgia, to recapture some of their better moments in life, I suppose.
This started it, a brittle-paged phantom comic. There's a whole pile of homegrown heroes. You can even catch up on the Pope's Catholic capers. But it's not just comics. It's just about every type of memorabilia imaginable. The place is cluttered with trading cards, Time Lords, and terrors from space. And soon, Superman's death.
Yes, some customers order up to 10 copies each.
The story of Soup's sacrifice will come in a sealed bag, complete with black armband and funeral poster. One thing's for sure though, he won't mourn the Man of Steel's passing for long. Life and comic collecting must go on.
I don't think it'll ever stop.
Anthony Griffiths, NBN News.
This is the dream home of Newcastle family the Ragastogies. Late last year, the family filed for a building application to council to construct a two-storey house in Kilgore Avenue, Bar Beach. As a matter of process, council then notifies nearby residents, calling for any objections. But council missed contacting a few residents, one of them Val Parks. Despite this, the application was approved. Renovation started around August this year, only to be stopped in mid-September on council's request following nearby residents' complaints. The residents were infuriated the council had failed to notify them and took their case to the Land and Environment Court. It ruled the building approval null and void.
I feel that the council has to really have a good look at what they're doing to the city and the beach side.
Ms Park says she and others don't oppose the development, although it will reduce their water views. Mr Rastogi Jr begs to differ.
They really have very, very small reasons for it. Fairly unjustified, I feel.
And as for council's mistake...
In view of the fact that we notify thousands of owners each year, occasionally to miss one is no great discredit to the officers concerned.
The Rastogis have lodged another building application that's set to go before council next month. As for financially compensating the Rastogis for time lost, Mayor McNaughton says that's a matter for council and the family to sort out.
Surfist organisers admit the competition could do with some spark. Prize money has been cut by more than $50,000 in recent years, and the event's ranking downgraded on the World Tour. Now, in a world first, Surfest is going for a nighttime final, like the cricket or footy. 6 years ago, a demonstration event was held under lights at Cronulla, south of Sydney, attracting big crowds. With a $40,000 power bill, Newcastle Beach is set to turn from night into day.
It's a costly exercise for 2.5 hours. Some people say we're mad for trying it, but if you don't try these things, you don't get anywhere, so we've got to do it.
Champion surfer Mark Richards surfed at the Cronulla demonstration and remembers most of the surfers were a little paranoid about sharks.
The Cronulla lifesavers did a rubber ducky patrol outside where the guys were surfing, and no one was eaten, so I guess it was all right.
Surfest organiser Warren Smith says he has the support of the Association of Surfing Professionals, the event starting next March. It's now a case of confirming that the surfers and the fans are ready to see the light. Peter Ryan, NBN News.
Walking down the corridors of the Classics Department, you hear ringing out the voice of a university legend, as much treasured as all of the knowledge held in these shelves of books. Professor Godfrey Tanner. To the thousands he's taught since 1959, Professor Tanner is very much a part of the furniture. Cambridge educated and conversant in a dozen languages, Professor Tanner has put students in touch with great civilisations and tongues of the past. But he fears for the future of education. Universities, he says, are under threat. And as for the politicians' notion of a clever country...
The word clever implies smart, shallow, getting quick results, which, to my view, are the 6 things about modern society. That appears to be what Mr. Keating and Mr. Dawkins want, and by Jove, they're getting it.
About 150 people attended a farewell dinner for the good professor last night, toasting what he's done for the uni's academic and social life.
He will be missed. He's a very distinctive and distinguished figure on the campus, but he leaves a very clear image of what an academic ought to be aiming to achieve.
Once he leaves his office in January, Professor Tanner intends to take a break overseas and complete a few books. But what will remain unchanged is Godfrey living by a maxim first uttered by the Greek philosophers thousands of years ago.
That man has primarily a natural desire to know, and man has the duty to belong to a community.
Scott Bevan, NBN News.
Good conditions saw the state championships produce some expert driving. Heats were completed without any major injuries. 22 competitors started in the feature race, 2 fell by the wayside. George Winder took out the event with Mel Guy second. In the super sedans, Peter Burling and Terry Nancaro had an impromptu meeting on the fence, much to the crowd's delight. Cobar's Nathan Wilson avoided the hang-ups to be the quickest around the circuit and take the title. The fender benders were in fine form, which for some means getting bent out of shape. Lindsay Keames rolling his new car. It was Greg Donovan who stayed upright long enough to take the checkered flag.
Today, Newcastle was mourning the loss of one of its broadcasting greats. Fellow 2KO announcer Pat Barton summed it up.
You talk about versatility. Program manager, administration, an actor, and as I said, very much at home in the studio or out in the open.
In 1938, a young office boy joined radio station 2KO. Matthew Lovell Tapp was brimming with ideas. His love of the dramatic arts, his showmanship, it all pointed to a successful career. World War II put that career on hold. In 1941, Tapp joined the Australian Military Forces. 1 year later, he joined the RAAF and for 3 years flew missions over Europe in Lancaster bombers. In 1944, Tapp was severely injured. One of his legs had to be amputated. He was 21. Returning to Australia, it was back to the broadcast booth, determined that a wooden leg would not stop him. He worked his way up at 2KO from junior announcer to program manager. He assisted many other budding radio personalities, including John Laws. From prime ministers to painters, Matt Tapp interviewed them all. In 1962, he switched to television, taking on the role of production manager at an embryonic NBN. In this special, celebrating 10 years of NBN, Matt showed everyone that he was still a ham. Here he tells the story of how the fledgling floor crew used 2 circus elephants to test the strength of the studio floor.
The little elephant... It didn't. Yes, it did.
Oh, you've got to be joking.
It did.
On our floor.
It got excited. The worst of it was, though, the unprofessional crew at that stage, untrained camera crew, kept the camera on it.
In the late 60s, Matt went back to 2KO, hosting a top-rating talkback program, Open Line, which ran until 1979. Matt is survived by his wife Nancy and 3 children, Peter, Keith and Angela. His funeral will be held at 1 tomorrow at Christchurch Cathedral.
We've lost a real identity, a complete man, not just in show business, but, interacting with him, with the human race. Lovely fella.
There's no business like show business, like no business I know. At first they told you you would not go far. At night you open, there you are. Next day on your dressing room they've hung a star. Let's go, on with the show.
"20 seconds of wind wreaked havoc. Teralba Road is still littered with rubble. Piles of twisted iron and wood lie on the footpath. A child's toy is still wedged high up in a wall. Shortland Electricity is still working to restore full power, and the residents still can't believe it.
We thought the house was coming down. We really did.
Dorothy Bright cannot find her veranda. When the storm struck, she says she felt like her namesake in The Wizard of Oz. Her damage bill totals almost $15,000. The house was not insured.
Moving's out. I'm not going to move, even if I've got to try and do it myself.
Other homes were opened up like doll houses.
The chap that I worked with, he saw it coming. It started over on the hill, and it was like a glowing ball, and it come and he said it seemed to bounce.
NBN's weatherman Nat Jeffrey explains the pattern which led to the explosive storm.
We had several thunderstorms that built in the late afternoon and evening. They came in from the west. This particular storm, we're looking at about 7 o'clock here, and it's tracking in from the west, moving at about 50 kilometres per hour. So by 8 o'clock, almost right over the Sugarloaf, West Wallsend area there, and quite an intense storm. We can see by the colours in there. A lot of rain, strong winds, of course, as you've experienced.
Insurance assessors and builders moved in today. Late this afternoon, the State Disaster Welfare Service announced it will give financial assistance to people like Dorothy Bright, although the area has not been declared a disaster zone. Anthony Griffiths, NBN News.
So this is a fundamental sort of structure. Again, looking at what it can achieve and running in safety from the beginning.
To encourage safe play.
There's a really big...
Injuries have got to stop.
Yes.
So what we'll simply do is that
Redhead resident Colin Mondi believes the problems that have plagued council for months, even years, could easily be solved. His plan is for council to buy the Lambton Colliery site, which landowners FAI have offered for sale for $750,000. Then, for another $150,000, council could demolish or renovate some or all of the controversial on-site heritage buildings.
So for $900,000, the council could purchase this land, develop it, make a residential subdivision and have enough money to left over to restore the buildings and to buy Greenpoint.
So where's the money for Greenpoint coming from? Colin estimates if council built 150 houses on site, selling them for $100,000 each, there'd be enough for Greenpoint plus cover construction costs of the residential estate. Mayor Doug Carley believes the idea is worthy of council's consideration. The Greenpoint suggestion has won favour with Action Committee spokeswoman Margaret Seacombe. Another group Colin may please are lake artgoers. Mr Mondi believes some of the heritage buildings could be renovated to become the city's new art gallery, replacing the current outgrown one. And Colin says there are many spin-offs to his grand plan, including employment during construction of the residential estate and preservation of the lake's industrial heritage. Catherine Lamond, NBN News.
In the past, councils and developers have had their heads in the silt over urban runoff. Topsoil, fertilisers and pollutants washed into oceans, rivers and lakes. Lake Macquarie is slowly being overtaken with sediment, forcing the City Council to spend big dollars on dredging and clean-up programs.
There's tens of thousands of tonnes of sediment going into the lake each year.
Jeff Hunt from the Department of Conservation and Land Management has published a book on erosion and sediment control, the do's and don'ts of development.
We've produced a statewide guidelines to ensure that sediment generated from all urban developments is minimised.
Most councils do have runoff guidelines, but these vary across the state. The book sets out details on sediment basins to catch escaping topsoil and vegetation corridors to slow down erosion. It's preventive medicine for an illness that could kill our waterways.